The lobby's still here.
Walking into the House of Prayer Church of God, you sense that this building had a glorious past.
The old boxes on either side.
You find clues that before this was a church,
Wow.
back in the days of silent film, and before this West Side neighborhood fell on hard times, this was Chicago's first movie palace, the Central Park Theater.
When you walked into the Central Park, you walked into a large space with double staircases coming down and draperies and hangings and statuary and paintings, and you immediately knew that you had arrived somewhere special.
The Central Park Theater was built in 1917 by the Chicagoans who would become the masters of the movie palace, Balaban and Katz. The duo previously owned a few of the primitive storefront movie houses known as Nickelodeons. These were simple, cramped rooms where patrons could see a silent film for a nickel.
The Nickelodeons were working class, blue collar. They were not places where women would go. So Balaban and Katz knew that if they blitzed things up and created a palace, that they would get a bigger audience.
The Central Park Theater was the world's first mechanically air-conditioned theater. In an era when many theaters had to shut down during the hot summer months, families could come here to cool off and enjoy a silent film and a live stage show. It was on this stage that jazz legend Benny Goodman made his professional debut.
And the biggest surprise here is what's above this false ceiling.
Hiding up here is the original balcony.
There's the old projection booth right up there. And that's the organ loft, where the organ pipes would have been.
And up above is the spectacular domed ceiling. It was once covered with hand-painted murals illuminated by a rainbow of brightly colored stage lights. This theater was a hit, and Balaban and Katz set out to bring the movie palace experience to other Chicago neighborhoods. On the north side, they built the Riviera. On the south side, the now demolished Tivoli. And downtown, their flagship theater, the Chicago. For these theaters, Balaban and Katz turned to the architects who made the Central Park a success, Rapp and Rapp. Their designs transported moviegoers to another time and place, evoking the opulent palaces of 17th century France. While other theaters merely had bathrooms, these palaces boasted elegantly decorated ladies' lounges and well-appointed smoking rooms for men. For the kids, Balaban and Katz offered a playground and free child care. And each and every guest was personally escorted to their seat by an usher in military-style regalia. Their uniformity went beyond just their uniforms. Ushers had to be white males, 5 feet 7 inches tall, and 125 to 145 pounds.
The ushers were a highly disciplined workforce here. They were picked from universities or colleges. They were considered men of good breeding.
And then there was the show itself. For 50 cents or less, audiences were treated to a 2.5-hour extravaganza.
You would have an orchestra of 35 pieces playing in the pit. It would come up on an elevator. You would have the organist play a 6 or 8 minute spotlight solo. You would have a newsreel, and then you would have a 20 or 25 minute stage show. After that, you'd see a movie, which in those days was only 60 to 75 minutes long.
By the mid-20s, the Balaban and Katz formula was being copied across the country. In the city of Chicago alone, there were more than 350 theaters, many of which remain, like the Oriental Theater, which is now used for stage productions. This was the second downtown movie palace built by Balaban and Katz. In the 1920s, there were 10 theaters within 1 block of here. In Logan Square is the 2,900-seat Congress Theater. This movie palace was bought by Balaban and Katz in 1929. It's now a live music venue, but the original interior is remarkably intact. The Rialto Square in Joliet was built by the Rubens brothers, one of many companies to emulate Balaban and Katz. They even hired architects Rapp and Rapp. They based parts of their design on Rome's Pantheon and the Palace of Versailles near Paris. And on Chicago's South Side, the Middle Eastern-style Regal Theater is now used for concerts. This was originally called the Avalon when it was built in 1927. Architect John Eberson said he drew his inspiration from a Persian incense burner that he found in an antique market.
All of these theaters were impressive, but the grandest of them all was Balaban and Katz's Uptown Theater.
It was built to the tune of $4 million, a stunning sum in 1925. No expense was spared, from the $30,000 bronze chandeliers to the nearly 100 oil paintings that graced the walls to the $50,000 worth of plush carpeting and drapes. But most remarkable was the Uptown's size, 4,300 seats. It's said to be the second largest movie palace in America after Radio City Music Hall in New York.
The auditorium has about 9 stories of space in it. It's just a vast, vast room.
And yet, 85 years after it was built, the massive theater is empty and decaying. The Uptown was initially a success. As many as 56,000 customers walked through its doors in a given week. Then came the Great Depression. The public couldn't afford to visit movie palaces, and theater owners couldn't afford the top-notch service and elaborate stage shows. At the same time, talking films like The Jazz Singer brought the silent film era to an end, and the movie palaces became obsolete.
You didn't need live orchestras, you didn't need stages or orchestra pits or dressing rooms, so you built streamlined, modern theaters of perhaps 1,000 seats.
The Uptown Theater continued to show movies through the 1970s. It even hosted concerts like Bob Marley and the Grateful Dead. But the revenues were never enough to pay the bills for such a huge theater, and it was shuttered in 1981. Today, it's owned by a concert and special events producer who's estimated it would cost $40 million to restore this theater to its former glory.
Dozens of other theaters suffered a similar fate to the Uptown. In fact, if you look around Chicago, you'll notice remnants of these old theaters all over the place.
Like the State Lake Theater downtown, the Belmont on the north side, and the Bell Park on the northwest side. This was once the 3,000-seat Diversey Theater in the Lakeview neighborhood. It was gutted to make room for the Century Mall in 1973. But by 2000, the mall was struggling, so the owners converted its top floors back into a movie theater. Still, other movie palaces were lost altogether to the wrecking ball.
The neighborhood theaters in Chicago had become white elephants or dinosaurs, and the overhead to operate them was incredible. So lots of those buildings came down to create parking lots.
Yet, movie palaces like the Chicago Theater have survived and even thrived as venues for live music and stage shows. And one historic theater is being used exactly as it was intended. This is the Portage Theater on Chicago's northwest side. 90 years after it first opened its doors, this theater is once again showing silent films. Film buffs come here for the nostalgia factor, but they also come for the music, the fantastic storytelling of these timeless films, and for the architecture that lets them escape to another time and a place.